Okay. Okay, everyone. Hey, Shuki. We're just starting now. We're on the bottom of page 105, Kufay Amid Beis, 105.2, towards the bottom. We are still learning obviously, about Bilam. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. Hold on. Okay. We're letting people in. I'm not sure it's a setting that we have. Okay. Hey, Avi, so let's bring up the page here. Hold on. Okay. So we're in the Gemara now. Okay. So we're holding the Gemara about Bilam. The Gemara says like this. Vayasem davar befi Bilam. It's talking about the angels, or the Gemara we'll see in a second. It's talking about that the Lord placed the matters or the words in Bilam's mouth. So how did Hashem do it? Meaning, what method did God use? Not that the question is obviously not how God did it, but what method did He use? Rabbi Lezer Malach, that there was an angel standing there, like Rashi, that would only let him say what God wanted him to say. And Rabbi Yonasan Omer Chaka, it was a hook. Just like when you hook a fish, you control the fish, and even in the fishes in the water, you have control of the fish with the hook. So too, Bilam's mouth was controlled, so to say, like by a hook. Rashi says that Malach Shemastro Kadosh Baruch Hu Malach Shlo Yanichu Lekalkel, Shlo Yanichenu Lekalkel. God said an angel by Bilam that the angel would not let Bilam say anything that would curse the Jewish people. According to Rabbi Yonasan, it was a chaka. A chaka is a hook. Nasim befi Bilam, that was like placed in the mouth of Bilam. That the hook would not let Bilam, like a hook controls a fish. He says, just as some of the Farshim say, the Marsha says that's like a fish that would only let Bilam say what Hashem wanted. Others say, the Medrash says that an angel sat in his throat that only allowed him to speak when he would say blessings, not to say curses. Like it says, Yishlach Tvari V'yarpim, the God gives healing, so to say, like through the angels. Or you say, there's all different ideas brought down that how God controlled like a key or a hook or what have you. But there's one I just want to bring down. Rabbi Pinto says that he asked the question like this: that if it said, we learned last week that Bilam only Yudei Das Elyon means that he knows exactly the time God is angry. But if God doesn't get angry, and because Bilam thought he could get God angry, or he knows the time and God does not get angry. And so what does he care if he curses? Why would we be concerned of Bilam's curse if he could only curse when God is angry, and God made sure not to get angry when Bilam was trying to figure out when God would get angry? So what's this whole stress to put an angel, a hook in his mouth to control he doesn't curse? If it doesn't make a difference if he curses, he won't be effective. Okay, that's Reb Pinto asks. That's the question, and my version over here doesn't give his answer. He says he goes into length of the reason about it. The Gemara continues. Rabbi Yochanan says, so we see from over here, this is a very interesting concept, meaning to say that we know that the strongest prophecies and blessings we have for the Jewish people, or one of the strongest blessings and prophecies, one of the sources of Mashiach in the Torah is from Bilam. So from the strongest blessings and prophecies of the Jewish people, we have from Bilam's not cursing the Jewish people, but blessing the Jewish people. But here Rabbi Yochanan says it didn't come out of a vacuum, these blessings. Everything Bilam said as a blessing was really a transformation from his intention of a curse. That exact idea is what he wanted to curse the Jewish people with, and he had to turn that same idea into a blessing. So Rabbi Yochanan, when we analyze the blessings of this wicked person, meaning Bilam, Atalamid, you could understand, my hayu beliboy, in what way he wanted to curse the Jewish people. It wasn't like the curses were separate from the blessings. They were within the same context of each blessing. And the Gemara goes into examples. Bikish Laimar, one of his curses was the Jewish people shouldn't have institutions of synagogues and yeshivas. So what was the transform? What did he have to say? The blessing of counter to that? He says, "Matova Alecha Yaakov." How great are the tents of Yaakov, the tents of Torah, the tents of yeshivos? Yaakov is ish oil, right? So yeshiv oil means a person who studies Torah, and a place of the oil moyed of a place of a Beis HaKnesses. So he wanted to curse the shuls, the synagogues, and the houses of study of the Jewish people, and therefore he has to bless the houses of study of the Jewish people. He wanted to loy tishra shechina aleihem. He wanted that God should not rest amongst the Jewish people. That was his intention of the curse. So what's the blessing of against that curse? Mishkanei Secha Yisrael. That where's the Shechina, where's the Mishkan of Hashem is with Yisrael, is with the Jewish people. Lo tihei malchusay nimshachas. He didn't want the Jewish people. And these are things that are, you see that Bilam represents an idea that hasn't changed. The person, we're going to learn how old he was when he died, all the different Gemaras about Bilam. But Bilam's ideas, Bilam could have died, but his ideas haven't died. So these issues, the issues with the shuls and the yeshivos, and the issues with Mishkan Esecha Yisrael, and the issues with Malchus Yisrael, these are issues that the anti-Semite, the people that are fighting Hashem against Hashem, the Hamas against Hashem, these are the same issues they have today. It's not that they're new issues. The Jewish people shouldn't have a continuation of their rule, of their kings. So he says the kingdom of Israel should not continue. Okay, so therefore he has to bless them. Not nitayu. So like the winding brooks, the brook goes long and long. So the continuation of the kingdom of the Jewish people. The Jewish people don't have the right to have the oil, the olive trees and the vineyards. Again, olive, and we know that yayin and shemen are different represent the Torah is compared to yayin, shemen, and mayim, right? Water, oil, and wine. So it's not he didn't want the zayis and the kramim. Zayis is the olive oil, and the kramim, both in the physical and spiritual sense, to be part of the Jewish people. Right? This week's parsha. In this week's parsha, we learn about the nesachim, the pourings on the mizbeach kisavayu, right after the Jewish people are told they're not going to go into the land. That's when they're told the mitzvahs of nesachim, of the pourings. What were the pourings made of? That they poured on the temple and the mishkan. The pourings are made up of oil and wine. So they shouldn't have oil and they shouldn't have wine. So he has to say kiganis ali nahar. So he says that gardens by the riverside, which is a strong expression that the gardens of Israel should remain. He wanted lo yihei reichen noidev. He didn't want the Jewish people to give off a good aroma, a smell. Those who've come to my Chassidus classes know that the idea of begodim, of reach beni, the idea of Yerichai, this week's Haftorah, is all about the smell of mitzvos. He didn't want that the mitzvahs of the Jewish people should give off a pleasant smell, that there's a positive, it's an aroma, it makes the world a better, more fresh place. So he didn't want the mitzvahs to give off reich and noidev. So he has to say ka'ahalim, not Hashem. So it's like the ahalim, the aloes that the Lord has planted, which gives off a good aroma. So Rashi says, when we analyze this, the blessings, again, the blessings didn't come out of anywhere. It's exactly what issues he had with the Jewish people. And again, this is the Bilam. Bilam is no longer here, but his issues are still there. So from his blessings, we learn what was his intentions. So here Rashi says, what's the basis of the teachings of Rabbi Yochanan? That what he wanted to say, that from the blessings we could understand the curses. It means in theory we could say maybe his blessings were one thing and his curses had nothing to do with the blessings. So what's the proof? So Rabbi Yochanan makes a statement, but what's the proof? So Rashi quotes the proof because the Torah says Vayahafech Hashem lekecha, that God, from the word hefech, he turned around, he transformed. The Hashem, your Lord, transformed the klala, the actual curse itself. Not just the idea of curses, but the specifics of the curse, livrachat, a blessing. Who are you right to the kalalem? He wanted to curse them. There shouldn't be shuls by the Jewish people. God says no, right? The angel stood there, the hook was there. You have to say, not only you're not going to curse the shuls of the Jewish people, but Mahatov Alacha Yaakov. Reichai Noidef, what does it mean Reichai Noidef? It gives off a good fragrance. So it says, Mi mitzvahs. What would give off a good fragrance would be the mitzvahs. Just to say that before we go to Rabbi Steinsaltz's, okay, Shuki, you're here twice. Before we go to Rabbi Steinsaltz's commentary here, I just want to say a few things. He says over here that okay, the idea the Maharsha says, why is oihel, like I said before, why is oihel a signification of a shul? Like it says Yaakov ish tam yoshev oihelim. Meant he lived in a person who lived in the yeshiva. Also, the who is this who says this? The In Yaakov says that the idea of zaysim and kramim, of olive oils and vineyards, also is referring to the people who study the Mishnah, the people who study the Talmud. And he brings from the pasuk in Atasili kramim. These are the rows, like the rows of the vineyard, or the rows of the study halls of the yeshiva that study the Talmud. But again, there's many levels of shemen and yayin. Like I said, the nesachim, the pourings on the base of on the Mishkan, and as Chassidus explains, the pourings is all about bringing a carbon is elevation. The pourings is to bring it down. That's the idea of Torah, to study, to bring down the light of Hashem. So he didn't like the element of shemen, and shemen is and yain has taste, and yain has yisod. Shemen gives flavor. So he didn't want these parts of the Torah to be from the Jewish people. Rabbi Steinzel says, what does it mean? Lo yehei reicha noideif, the fragrance will not diffuse. So he says the Mashar explained that this means their kingdom will not be renowned throughout the world. So unlike Rashi, who says the reach is the mitzvos, the Mashar says the reach is, again, nothing's changed. People shouldn't be impressed with the Jewish people. The kings of the Jewish people, leadership of the Jewish people shouldn't be impressive. What's irking people today is all the attention the Jewish people are getting, right? So he didn't want that. Okay. We continue. That another thing he didn't want. Lo yiyeh melachim bali koima, which is what we just said before. So before he said he didn't want the continuation of the kingdom, but now he's saying he didn't want that the kings should be of stature. David, Solomon, Saul, Chizkiyahu, right? The great kings, the Yeshayahu, the great kings of leadership of the Jewish people. So therefore, where do we see that? Because he says, Ka'arazim alei moyim, that they should be like, therefore he has to say they should be like cedar trees by the water. So the cedar trees by the water is a sign that he wanted weak trees. Lo yileh melech b'melech. He didn't want there should be continuation within the families of the king. The king, a son of a king, is a sign, right? V'yarach yamim mamamlachtoi hu banav, right? The Torah says the idea of a king is that the king has the descendants that are like him. We're going to learn in a few minutes the curses of a king is not so much the curse of the king's dynasty himself, but of a sign of the continuation, right? David was told that Shlayich b'neir l'olam va'ed. Solomon was punished. He lost for his son. He lost 10 tribes. Yeravam ben Avat was punished. The son died. So the continuation, the legacy that the king leaves is a powerful statement. He didn't want that by the Jewish people. Every time they should have to find a new king. Lo yileh melech ben melech. So what does he have to say? So where do we see that in the blessing? Because he says Yizal mayim midalav, that water will flow from the branches. So the branch itself is an extension, and the water continues from the extension. Right? This is all, again, like I said, Bilam's issues haven't changed. That the kingship, the rule of Israel should not rule over other nations. Israel shouldn't be a strong nation amongst the nations. So therefore it says, V'zara his seed b'mayim rabim is in plenty of water. His seed is a sign of his effect. The effect of the Jewish people is going to be in many waters, not just in the waters of Jerusalem. Laiti azam achusim, there shouldn't be a strong kingdom. It says v'yarmi agag malkoi, and his kings shall be higher than Agag. The Agag will be higher than Agag. Laiti emas malchusan. God forbid someone should fear the Jew. So he says v'tinase malchusei. So therefore, he has to say the opposite of that, that the kingdom should be exalted. From the word hisnasus, elevation. Hisnasus gives yira, awe. People shouldn't be in awe of the Jewish people, of the kingdom of the Jewish people. So Rashi says, what does it mean? Vayori mi'agig malkoi, mitargiminian v'titakif mi'agig, will be stronger than Agav, shti malchusei aza. You should have a strong kingdom. Again, when you study a Talmud itself, written 2,000 years ago, about a story that happened close to what was it, 1,500 years before that, right? Bilam is the beginning of the Jewish people, before we entered the land. Before we become a nation, we went through 300 years of the judges until we found the kings, and then the kings and the temple and second temple and destruction, right? So when you read the Talmud in 5,785, that was written so long ago, and it's present, the issues are present till today. Nothing's changed. It's not comforting, but it gives a sense of calmness to know that nothing's new. Shlomo Melech says, "Ein chodesh tachas hashemesh," nothing new under the sun. So the issues of Bilam were the same issues. So he was forced to bless them. But and this is why the Gemara tells us this. Why does the Gemara have to tell us? Why is Rabbi Yochanan telling us what was the intentions of Bilam? We could read the blessings and go further, because it's important to know these things. It's important to be able to identify when you hear the narrative and the rhetoric out there today, even to identify where it comes from. These are the same arguments of Bilam. This is what Bilam says. Know that the sources, it could be camouflaged in all kind of nice writing and intentions, etc. But you have to know how do you know to identify it if it's from Bilam? Look at the Gemara. The Gemara says these are the same things Bilam said. And I'm sure if you asked Bilam, he wouldn't say I'm an anti-Semite. He would also tell you he could camouflage in his reasons of why he says what he says. Okay, let's go. The Gemara goes further. Enough of my personal commentary. Amar Rab Abba bar Kahana. Rab Abba, the son of Kahana, said as follows: Kulam chazru l'klala. This is not such a simple Gemara. The Gemara says that so the angel, so to say, forced, or the hook, whatever, forced Bilam to transform his issues into blessings, the specifics. So Rab Abba says, but you know what happened? Eventually, with the sins of the Jewish people, he got his curses. Kulam chazru l'klala. All those specific blessings went back to their original intent of curses. The yeshivas were hurt, the shuls were hurt, the kingdom is no longer here, the temple's no longer here, the kramim, right? What do we say in the Haftorah of Tisha B'Av? The vineyards have no grapes. So besides chutim batik nisiyos, the shuls that the Jewish people have, we know there's a lot of writings about how the Jewish people changed from a people of the temple to the people of the synagogue. So chutz mi batik nisiyos batik midrashes, the shuls and the yeshiva stayed with the Jewish people throughout the diaspora. The kingdom's no longer here, the strength is no longer here, the awe is no longer here, but the shuls and the Beis Medrash stayed with the Jewish people throughout time. So even Hitler, Yamach Shemai, wanted to destroy the shuls and the yeshivas, right? He went and blew up all the shuls of Europe. The same Rashi that Rashi brings to support Rabbi Yochanan, that the general transformation of the curses turned into blessings, here Rab Abba bar Kahana says, but if you analyze the actual wording, the wording is klalav, singular. It should have said, the curses, because there was many curses that turned into many blessings. And why does it say the curse to the blessing? It's singular. It says the singular, not the plural. By saying it the singular means only one curse ended up remaining a blessing, and that's Ma Tovo Alach Yaakov, which is interesting. That's why we say it every day. The Gemara continues. Rashi says that V'kulam kol habrachis shall Bilam chazru l'klalis k'may shari kavanasi mitchila. That what Bilam intended. So if you go according to Rab Abba bar Kahana, it wasn't a lost venture, right? If you're going to say that it happened kacha, it happened just the way it happened, that nothing to do with Bilam is one thing. But Rab Abba bar Kahana says is that it's the specifics. When you analyze what the Jewish people went through in the diaspora and the gullus and the destruction, especially the first temple, a lot of them are applicable to the first temple, the kingdom of Israel, and then eventually to the second temple. So you see that at the end of the day, what he wanted to accomplish, him and Balak didn't accomplish it at the time. Like many years later, it did get it. It was from a certain level of accomplishment. But kulam kol habrachis shel Bilam chazru l'klala. All the blessings turned back into curse. Like Rashi says, that was his intention. Besides, aside from the shuls and the yeshivas. Right? They've never shut down the shuls and the yeshivas. Right? That's the last battle we're battling today. Haklala levracha, achas min haklalas hafach lebracha. Only one of the curses remained the blessing. Shlechazr la'olam, never return to a curse. Loi kol haklalas, but that's not the plural. It's not all the curses. Levracha is shechazr, because the other ones did turn into curses. All right, it's an unfortunate opinion, but it's not so out there. He's talking about the reality. Amr Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani says as follows. Amr Reb Yonasan, in the name of Yonasan. What does it mean? Ne'emanim p'tziyei oyev v'na'ataris neshikoi soinei. So it says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. It means better to take a punch from a friend than the kisses of an enemy. V'na'ataris neshikoi soinei, from the kisses of an enemy. It's better to have the curses that Achia Shaloni cursed the Jewish people. When I'll give a little reference to the story in a second. As Yisrael, the Jewish people, better than the kisses, the blessings of Bilam the wicked. Achia Shaloni kilas Yisrael bekana. He compared the Jewish people to a reed. Right, a reed sustains, works, is a very good kind of growth, sameach, in a harsh environment. So the reed is maybe it moves around, it's in the water. Says the Jewish people, the Lord will smite Israel like a reed shaken in the water. So a reed shaken in the water, it's very weak, it can be thrown around. But what's the difference? But it stays in the water. It goes around, it gets thrown around, but it stays. And it's stuck. Okay, let's just do this Rashi because we're going to turn the page and I'll get to what Yachia Shaloni was talking about. Na'ataris nafachis k'may etish mahapechas atfuah klaimer nemonim petzia oiv v'nafachis menamonis v'nshikas asayna. Better to have the punches or the slaps or the wounds of a friend than the curses, than the blessings of an enemy. So we just continue. So what is Achia Shaloni cursed the Jewish people that they should be like a reed, machlif v'sharshav merubin. It says, and it could be even if you change its stock and its roots are deep. At the end of the day, nothing can really push the reed out. It could get thrown around, you could cut it off, but it grows back again. It goes with the punches, with the winds. It says, because it goes and comes, and once the wind subsides, the reed remains in its place. So to the Jewish people, he said, you can be like a reed, you can get thrown around. It says also, machlif, sharash of machlif, you could cut off the reed and it grows back. So what's the story before we get to the negative, the kiss of Bilam? So what was the curse of Achia Shaloni? Again, we learned before that Achia Shaloni was the prophet who tells Shlomo he's going to lose 10 of the tribes, and he hands it over to Yeravam, the son of Nevat. So we learned in the beginning of Chelek that Yeravam, the son of Nevat, was one of the kings that don't have a portion of the world to come. So he was a great, righteous, studious Talmud Chacham, a great student of Torah. He learned great secrets from Achia Shaloni that the world has never heard, but then he goes and builds idols because of his ego. We studied that a few months ago. So what happened was his son was struck with illness. Yeravam sends his wife to his old teacher. After everything's said and done, right? He worships idols, he takes the Jewish people, he corrupts the whole system. But when he has a personal crisis, where does he send his wife? He sends his wife back to his old teacher, to his Rebbe. And he sends his wife to his Rebbe to daven for his son. And that's when Yeravam is told by Achia is told by God that she disguised herself. She wanted to pretend like she wasn't the queen. He said, as soon as she knocked, he said, come in, the wife of Yeravam. And he told her, your son's going to die. And he cursed the Jewish people. And this is the curse that he cursed the Jewish people, that they're going to be like a reed because they followed the sins of Yeravam. But in that curse is a blessing, because at the end of the day, with all the turmoil that the reed has to go through, it remains. The Jewish people, he was basically saying, you're going to go through difficult times, but you're still going to remain as a people. What was Bilam? So that's the curse of Achia. So he cursed the Jewish people, but in the curse is a hidden blessing. But Bilam Arasha Be'echem Ke'eres. He says we said before that he has to bless them like a cedar tree. What's the problem with the cedar tree? The problem with the cedar tree is Ma Erez Eini Ayman B'Makim Emayim. It doesn't stand by the water. Rishrash Rav Muatim. The Erez doesn't have strong roots like the reed. The Ein Gizei Machlif. If you chop off a tree, the tree's not going to grow back. Afilu kol aruches b'olam ba'is v'naishvis by. Yes, that we could withstand a lot of the winds. But when the southern wind comes, means Rashi says in the commentary that the cedar tree is built to sustain the winds of the north, even though the north doesn't neshavas, it's built to withstand the eastern and western winds. But it's not built to the southern wind doesn't come, but when it does come, it doesn't withstand the southern wind. Says when the southern wind comes, it gets uprooted because it doesn't have strong roots. It's built to last up to a certain point, the erez tree. So seemingly Bilam says the Jewish people could be like an erez, like a cedar tree. But at the end of the day there's a vulnerability that once it reaches that vulnerability, there's no return. There's no turning it back. Not only that, another thing that the reed is better than the cedar, that the halacha is that a part of the reed could be used as a kulmus, as a pen, lichtav ben a sefer Torah, to write a sefer Torah. I mean, that may not be the custom, but you could write the sefer Torah as a pen or a pencil for the ink of a sefer Torah, neviim uksuvim, and parts of the prophets and the writings. So the reed itself, I'm sure that's alluding also to something within a blessing. But the idea is that it's not just used for, there's still things you could do. Because even if it gets uprooted, there's still things you could still be productive. Even the most challenging times you could be productive, the reed could do something. The cedar tree, what could you do with it? All you could do is use it as firewood. So he says, Eini oimid b'makim mayim. He says the cedar doesn't stand by the river. And even though he says the arazim by the water, so then arazim by the water means does have a good strength of the water. So he says there, Shechina hida amra iu, amar ka'arazim claimer she'ein oimdim emakim mayim. Shechina amra alei mayim, that he said should be like a cedar. And God added should be like a cedar on the water. V'chein kulam mefarsh ba'god v'chai gavna. K'nechalim nati hu amar k'nechalim poiskin l'pa'amim yatze baskal amar nati. Hu amar k'ganes amar baskal ali nahar. So the Rashi says that the whole prophecy, he only said half the blessing. And God came in and fulfilled the rest of the prophecy. Hu amar ka'oyelim yatzi mena baskal amar nat Hashem. It should be like an oil that God planted. So he was forced to say positively. He couldn't say out the entire, he couldn't complete his sentence. God completed his sentence for him. Ruach deraimus, so here Rashi says that the southern wind is kasha, is a hard wind. And when the southern wind comes, it will uproot the cedar tree, and therefore it's not really, better have, you have to ask yourself, can you be, right? Say, sometimes it's better to be flexible than to be strong. So strong is strong, but if you break strength, it's broken. Flexibility, yes, the reed is flexible, it's in the water, it gets pushed around, but it stays, it remains. At the end of the day, in a crisis, the reed is stronger than the cedar. So Rabbi Steinzal says like this in his footnote. I should say before we get to Rabbi Steinzal, he says that it says about the reed being used as a kulmus, as a pencil or a pen to write the Torah. So he says the ainu afim upam gamakon nekram kaimi. If in the event, in extreme weather environment, the reed also gets uprooted, it still has a use. It could be productive in a positive way, not just to be a source of fire, of an energy, but could actually be used to write on the ideas of Torah. So to the Jewish people, even if they get uprooted in a gullus, in exile, and they go to gullus, they still could write to continue the writings of Torah, and not just the writings of Torah, the teachings that were learned in Gullus, right? The Gemara, the Mishnah after the Churban, now even though the oral law was given by Mount Sinai, and it didn't go into publication and growth until the destruction of the Second Temple. That's when Rebbe started the Mishnah, and then was the Talmud, then was this the responses and the Gaonim, and then the Mishnah Torah, and then all the way down to the Shulchan Aruch and the laws. Till today, we're still publishing Torah, even in the exile. So the reed is like a kulmus; it could be like the pen. I'm reading still from the Marsha, but to be a cedar tree, when you cut out the cedar tree, all it could do is it can't reproduce. Can't continue anything. It could be a source of fire that burns out eventually. And then there's nothing left, right? After you burn, as strong as the fire will be from a cedar, it lasts so long. The kulmas, the pen, lasts forever. The writings of the pen, the teachings of the pen, last forever. Okay, so he continued. Just going to read Rabbi Steinsaltz's comments, and we'll go down further. A southern wind uproots the cedar. Since the cedar grows in mountainous regions with relatively few shallow roots, it only has shallow roots. It generally positions generally positions what roots it has in such a manner to anchor it against the common east wind in the winter and the west wind in the summer. So basically he's saying that the cedar has, so to say, it's few roots, so it plans, right? So it plans for the west and the east wind in the winter and the summer. A north wind is rare. The south wind, which occasionally gusts with no prior warning, attacks the cedar from a direction against which the tree is not secure, and is not capable of uprooting the cedar. So because the southern wind it doesn't plan for it because it's rare. So when it does come, then you have no strategy, you have no protection. It says even when part of the reed is savored, it serves as a sacred purpose. Similarly, the sanctity of the Jewish people is not diminished even when they are replaced. The Masha says because it could be used to writing of the Torah. Okay, kulmas, he just says what's the quill in a kulmas is a Greek word. Okay, let's go further. So we're going to continue. In the prophecy of Bilam, he saw the Kani. The Kani here refers to Yisroi. Yisroi is the Kani. Yisroi is, of course, Moshe, Zipporah's father, the father-in-law of Moshe. We learned that in the Torah, right? So what does it mean that that he looked at the Canith and he said his parable, he said his mashal. Bilam says to Yisrael, Kani, oh, time out, Yisrael. Now you're a big chush of a guest, of a person of Moshe, right? Weren't you sitting there with us when we advised Paroi? We're going to learn in a second that before Paru, in the beginning of Shemos, Paroi says, Havinis Chakmala, let's figure out a plan. Let's smarten ourselves against the Jewish people. It wasn't just he was talking to himself. He had a council. And who was made up of his council? Bilam, Yisro, and Job. So he says to Yisro, you were there too. How could you now all of a sudden be placed by the mighty of the world? Meaning to say, because we're going to learn that the descendants of Yisro become members of the assembly of the Sanhedrin, that his descendants sat on the Sanhedrin. So he says, oh, you were sitting on the assembly of Paro, and now all of a sudden your descendants are sitting in the assembly of the Sanhedrin. So Rashi says that what does Bilam tell to Yisro? Lo yimanu yisibaitzi eitze shegazer pari kol ben yilo dayaret bitmia. Come on, you were there. Were you not there at the sitting that God helped guide Paroi with the decree, throw them in the Nile? Who said throw them in the Nile? It was based on the committee. We're going to see what his participation was in a second, but he sat there. How could he sit by the Eitzani Island, by the Eisan, the powerful people of the world? Your descendants are going to sit in the Lishkas Agazis, and we learned before Lishkas Agazis is the chamber of the Gazis, is that where the Sanhedrin sits in the temple, the Sanhedrin of 71. What does it mean, Eisan? Strength is your place of sitting. You sitting amongst the strong people. What did you do to merit that? So he says, what does that mean? What's he talking about? So V'hainu Damar Rabbi Chia bar Abba. This is what Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in the name of Rab Simoi. What does Rabbi Chia, the son of Abba, say in the name of Rab Simoi? Shleisha hayu ba'etze etze. There were three people who sat and counseled Paro when Paro says, "What are we going to do about the Jewish people?" So they said, "Slavery, throw the firstborn in the Nile." Who told them that? Elohein Bilam of Yisrael, the council that sat to suggest to Paro what he should do, how he should deal with the Jewish problem. Right? There's a famous meeting the Nazis had in Germany or in Poland to decide the final solution. So that again, nothing's changed. That meeting happened before. Paro took a council also, and he sat with Bilam, Eov, and Yisrael. Bilam, what is Bilam's participation? What was his participation in this meeting? Sheyatz, he was the one who gave the advice: throw the firstborn in, slave them. Neherag, he got killed. At the end, if we learn in Pinchas that Bilam is one of the people that gets killed in the war against the Midian. Eov, Job sat. Sheshasak, he was quiet. He didn't protest. He didn't advise. Nidim biyasurim. Therefore, Job was punished with suffering. The whole book of Job is about his suffering. So though you could say that it's a test and all that, but if you want to know the background story, was that he sat there and he didn't protest. The Yisrael said he didn't know, I guess, why he was being called into a meeting. When he heard he was being called in, he ran away. He wasn't interested in being part of it. Therefore, so his children sat in another seating, and that was the seating of the Sanhedrin. And how do we know that the family of Yisrael, the descendants of Yisrael, sat in the Sanhedrin? It says, these are different names that sat. They were taken from Yaibitz. The Canis and Yaibitz, they lived in. It says Hema Hakenim Habayim Machmas Avi Beis Reichav. Reichav is the father of Yisrael. Like it says, Ubnei Keni Chaysim Meisher Olam Yira Tamarim. He brings the different verses to support that the people of the Yaivitz, who were part of the Lishkas Agazis, that were part of the 71 assembly, so they were the people that the descendants of the Keni, which is the father of Moshe, who lived in the city of Tamarim, of palm trees. If you check the map where it's talking about the Yaivitz, it's talking about somewhere similar to where Jericho would be today, so towards the or a little further up north, but towards by the Jordan River behind Jerusalem. Okay, so he's basically, Bilam is saying you were there, but the fact is he was there and he ran away. Job stayed around, and so therefore it says also the Eitz Yosef says that it says somewhere else that one of the reasons why Bilam was killed is because he also suggested to the princes of Midian to corrupt the sons of Israel with the daughters of Midian. So it's not seemingly because he suggested to Paris. He says it's a combination of the two. He brings down also the Zohar says it wasn't just that Job was quiet. The Zohar says that he says, should I kill the Jewish people? So Job said, don't kill them, but torment their bodies. So he maybe was trying to find a way out. But at the end of the day, it says, Mida keneged Mida. God says that you said that they should be tormented, you're going to be tormented. The Zohar quotes. Everything that he wanted, that he suggested that should happen to the Jewish people, maybe he meant he had good intentions, Job, but at the end of the day is what he suggested happened to him. Okay, let's go a little further. Bilam says in his prophecies, Vayisa Mashallah, he took up his parables, his mashal. Right? He says, he who lives from what God has appointed him. Mi Yichya, who lives, misumay what God appointed him. What did he mean by that? So Amr Rab Shimon made Lakish, Rab Shimon Reish Lakish says like this. Woe is the person who sustains themselves with the name Kel. Again, the name Kel means God. Let's see what that means in a second. Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, woe is to the people that put themselves, Simoy Kel, they get involved with what God wants, when they try to protest when God's going to want to redeem his children, right? When Mashiach comes and God's going to want to redeem his children and someone's going to get in the way. So Rabbi Yochanan says, woe to that person. Mi matul kasuse, who's going to try to throw their clothing, their garment? Bein lavi lelevia, between a lion and a lioness, ishashin iskakim imzeh, when they want to mate, meaning when the lion and lioness want to mate, and this is a parable to God saving the Jewish people, are you going to try to get in the middle, in between that? That's a bad idea. If you're going to try to stop God from redeeming the Jewish people, you want to get in the way of the coming of Mashiach to prevent that. So woe to the person who's trying to get involved in that. So he says, So what Rashi explains that what Shalakish is saying is, what does it mean he tries to give himself life from the name of Kel? So he was talking to Pare. The Pare tried to say that he was a god. Lashon Achar, Rashi says another idea is woe to the people. Woe to the people who want to just live with the word of God, meaning what God created in this world, the benefits, to take all the physical and enjoyment of this world and throw off the yoke of Torah and just fatten themselves with the fat of the land. That's not a good idea either. He said, I also heard from my teacher that Mesumai Kel means when God is going to when God's going to redeem for himself and to pay reward to the tzaddikim is also Mesumai Kel. That's in a positive way. Woe to the people that are going to be in that ba'isa yamim, in those days, meaning the days of Mashiach, and they're going to try to stop the redemption of the Jewish people. Who would put a garment between a lion and a lioness? That they shouldn't mate. That's a dangerous. That's a bad idea. Who's going to try to stop God from bringing in the Jewish people, to bringing us home? Anyone's going to try to get in the way of the Jewish people is like a person trying to get in the way of a lion and a lioness. So he says, so he brings down the different commentaries. He says, some say that this refers to people who realize the sacred names, as when they are unworthy, they'll be punished and die, the Marsha says. An additional interpretation cited by Rashi is based on the statement in the Talmud, what shall a man do and thereby ensure that he will die? He shall sustain himself and indulge in an indulging manner. One who dedicates his life to the pursuit of pleasures will never reach genuine life. Okay, that's based on what Rashi says. Okay, the other commentaries, he brings different ideas, but the same idea basically, the idea of using the name of God for your own benefit. Okay, this is a famous verse. Anyone who's familiar with the business in Eretz Yisrael, the shipping company of Eretz Yisrael today, once was owned by the Chafer brothers, is called Sim, right? Known as Zim, right? Zim Shipping Company. So where does it come from? It comes from the blessings of Bilam. It says Sim Yad Kitim. Sim is ships from the Kitim. The Kitim are a people. So what does he mean? This is a fascinating Gemara, especially how Rabbi Steinsaltz learns it. He does not learn it like most commentaries. And if you knew Rabbi Steinsaltz personally, which I had the privilege of knowing, it makes sense. So it says, V'tzim yad kitim. What does it mean, sim? The ships that came from Kitim. Amar Rav. Rav says, Liboin Aspir. What does Liboin Aspir mean? So Rabbi Steinsaltz says it's the Roman legion. We know that Rome doesn't just mean Rome. Rome means the Western civilization. V'inu Asher v'inu Aver. In the past few days, what's going on in Iran, a lot of people have been quoting this verse, Inu Asher, Inu Aver. Asher is Assyria. Like we've learned before, the Syrian Empire, which is Nineveh, who kind of is northeast Syria into Iraq towards Iran, right? So towards Persia. So it says Inu Asher, they're gonna afflict Asher. Inu Aver. Who's Aver? Aver is the Jewish people. Like we're the children of Aver. Also Aver Hanar, right? Ivri. Ad Asher Kotli Mikdal, until we reach Asher, they're going to be killed. After they reach, so seemingly it depends how you look at what this is referring to, right? You could say it's referring to Rome never conquered the Persian Empire, right? The Rome went up till Ashur, and then from Persia, we stopped being murdered by the Christians, Romans, and the Jewish people lived under Persia. So you could say after Ashur, which would be Persia, we were enslaved, we were in Gaulis, but we weren't being killed like we were being killed in Europe and under the Roman Empire. So let's just see how Rabbi Steinsaltz learns it over here. He says, and they shall afflict Assyria and they shall afflict Aber. They reach Assyria and they will kill, he says, the Jewish people. From that point forward, they will enslave them and not kill them. So the killing stops after the Roman legions. But again, a lot of the commentaries use this as an indication, not just of the Romans versus the Persians, but that there's going to be a point where Rome is going to stop with the killing, but the Jewish people are still not going to have freedom. It's going to go from being killing once it reaches Persia. So let's see what Rashi says. Tzim Sfinas Gedolos. What does it seem? Big boats, right? Big boats are heading into the Middle East now. Tzim Sfinas Gedolos. Vitzir Adir Bal Yavrenu. He brings a quote from Isaiah to show that Tzim means the big great ships that are coming. Vitzim Yad Kitim Amarav Libe Asper. The Kitim Hainu Mokir Shishmoikach. It's a place. Reb Steinsaltz says, and he has a source for it. Doesn't just say. He has a source to say that this is the Romans. He says, Ad Asher Makatli Katli, Me'ashve'elach Meshabdlu Shabude. He will kill them until Asher, till Assyria, and then the Jewish people get enslaved. V'tzimiat Kitim V'inu Asher, the Katlu V'inu over the Meshabdlu Ad Asher. That the Kitlu V'inu over the Meshabdlu Ad Asher. I'm not sure what this Rashi means. From this Rashi, it means, seems like they only get enslaved until Assyria. Now here Rashi says, who's the Kitim? Who are these Kutim? Romim. They're the Romans. Glomer. This nation that God is going to bring on ships. Asidim lahargas kol umas. They're going to kill out all the other nations. Ad Asher until they reach Assyria. When we Asher from Assyria, they're going to stop killing them. But they're going to enslave them. And here Rashi says fascinating that this is not talking about what I said before about the Roman legions fighting against the Persians, because that happened already. Rashi lived after that. Rashi says, we're talking about the days of Mashiach. In the days of Mashiach, the big ships are going to come carrying the Rome, and it's going to go to the Syria, and the killing is going to stop, and then it's going to start to enslavement, whatever that all means. I guess stay tuned. Okay, so Reb Steinsaltz says in the notes, the Roman legions, according to their variant reading of the Gemara, which says ligan means a ligan, aspir, the Gaonim explain, again, the Gaonic period is after the Talmud, that a Roman regiment will attack the Persian Empire. Right? This is what we're literally talking about today, reaching as far as Assyria and killing the Jews. From that point on, the Romans will weaken and they will be forced to treat the Jewish people with more consideration. They will enslave them instead. So the Jewish people stop being killed. And again, according to Rashi, this is all talking about the times of Mashiach. All right, what does this all mean? We'll have to figure it out as it happens. Apparently, the correct version of this term, ligon aspir, is deriving from the Latin ligo, genitive legions, which was the largest regiment of the Roman army, comprising some 3,000 soldiers. Asper might be related to the Greek, a tactical unit of Ptolemaic army, a Greek military unit. So here Rashi doesn't seem to see it's talking about the future, it's talking about the past. Okay, let's go a little further. We have a little few more minutes. So Bilam doesn't curse the Jewish people, at least not in the beginning, right? The Rebbe says that the curses end up happening later. But as far as Balak was concerned, he blessed the Jewish people. So he leaves and they mock Bilam. And what's Bilam say? Hinini I'm going back to my people. I'm going to tell you what the people are going to do to your people. Seemingly, he was going to curse them. But it says Iyatzcha. The word Iyatzcha is from the word Yoyetz. I'm going to advise you. So what is he advising? We know that the what happened in the story, right? After Bilam leaves, then it says the Torah tells us the sin of Baal Pa'or. What was the sin of Baal Pa'or? That the Jewish people started to sleep with the Midian daughters, and through that served, we're going to learn how that worked. So through that served the idol of Pa'ar that brought God's wrath. It was a Shittim, one of the places of anger that remain of the Jewish people's behavior throughout the desert. There's the golden calf, there's the spies of this week, and there's the story of what happened at the end by the daughters of Midian, right? God goes out and sends Moshe with Pinchas, Mechames Hashem b'Midian. It's God's battle against Midian for what they did to the Jewish people. So here he says, I'm going to suggest Ashayasa, what the Jewish people are going to do to you. So the Gemara says, Amcha la'amazah. Why does it say the Jews to you? He's giving advice about the daughters of Midian, but you're going to do to the Jews, what you should do to the Jews. Miboile, it should have said. So Amr Rav Bakana, again, Rav Bakana is the one who says, Ka'adim shem kallas atzmei v'toil k'las b'cherim. He kind of talked in the background way. So assuming like he's cursing himself, but he really means to curse others. Rashi will explain what that means. He says, "V'hein hayu." Rashi goes ahead, so he says, "V'hein hayu v'nei Yisrael lo gersinin." Okay, let's take that part out. Hachi gersin. This is how we have to learn the Gemara. It means there's different versions of the Gemara. Some people say that the Gemara is already talking about the suggestion of the hein hayu. This is that these were the. How do we know that Bilam was the one who suggested the daughters of Midian? Later, when there's the war and Moshe says, "Don't let anyone live," they bring back the women. So Moshe says, "Why did you bring back the women? These are the women that Bilam suggested. Hein hayu livnei Yisrael ba'atzas Bilam. Bilam was the one who suggested that they come and entice you." So, but he says the version is like this: like we have. I'm going to suggest to you what the people do to you, meaning the Jewish people to Midian. So the Gemara says, it should have said what you should do to the Jewish people. It was Bilam who suggested to Balak that he should stumble the Jewish people. It says the daughters of Midian were with Dvar Bilam. Bilam was the one who suggested that they send out their daughters, and Midian was so aggressive about it that we're going to learn that not only did the king Eglon of Miriam, not only did he send out his daughters, did he send out the daughters of Midian, he sent out his own daughter. So he says, Rashi says, he puts the curse on someone else. Kach Bilam, so too Bilam. Basically, there was a battle of egos between Balak and Bilam. Balak was a very powerful king. He wasn't a weak king. It says he was a greater magician than Bilam. He just didn't have, Bilam had powers and he had powers. So there was a battle of egos, right? You have to be careful how you word things. That also hasn't changed. So he says Bilam didn't want to litlei shiflei zebe Balak. He didn't want to put down this low kind of behavior to Balak. That he has to ask Bilam what he should do. How he could corrupt the Jewish people. So he talked in a roundabout way. I'm going to suggest to you what the Jewish people need to do to you, so Balak doesn't have to look as if he needs suggestions from Bilam. But he was so hateful for the Jewish people that in this case, Bilam was ready to forgo his own ego in order to protect the ego of Balak. So Balak should act on his suggestion because he knew what his suggestion would be right and would work. So he was ready to talk in a background way and not talk directly to Balak. Well, Balak won't respond well to suggestions, right? People you have to know how to say things. Anyone who's been listening to the news, how people are talking, you have to know how to word things not to offend anyone. That the hand of Moav shouldn't get affected by the Jewish people. And this means that what the people are going to do to you in a background way. Also, it could be the Torah was talking in the background way. The Torah talks a lot of times b'lashon saginor. Right? The Torah says Soini Yisrael. When the Torah says it wants to talk about the curses that are going to happen to the Jews, it says the curses are going to happen to the enemies of the Jews. Why? Because you don't want to say the curses of the Jews. So too over here, so to say the Torah is saying that it's a suggestion against that what Jews are going to do to Bilam, not to Balak, not what Balak is going to do to the Jews. Let's just finish off. What did he tell them? He says, we have 6 minutes. Let's see if we can pack in the end of this story. Amr Lahem, he said to Balak and his people, Bilam suggested, God hates lewd behavior, zima, wrongful sexual behavior. And the Jewish people are in need, or they have a desire for linen. Why? Because Rashi says the Jewish people, Egyptian linen, right? So the Jewish people were used to linen, but in the desert they didn't have linen. Although this generation wasn't really, they were children when they left Egypt. It's 40 years later. But either way, he figured the Jewish people wanted linen. So how are you going to get the Jewish people, excuse me, into the tent so they could start a relationship? Was starting off with economics. So boy vayisiach, let me give you a suggestion. Asay lehem kloim, set up, so to say, hangings of these linens to bring them in. So the Jewish people, after the story of Bilam, so they kind of went shopping, went to the mall. Set up prostitutes, an older prostitute outside, a younger one inside the tent. So to say, like in the marketplace. Let them start with selling clothing, and from selling clothing, one thing will lead to the next, and you'll get them. So it says, Kloim oilim, set up tents, shall kloim k'maish asa b'shukim, like they set up in the shuk. So right here he says, linen garments were unique, were curious in Egypt, and the Jewish people grew accustomed to them. Since such garments were not available in the wilderness of the desert, they desired them. Okay, so they were waiting to, a person is traveling, and after you travel 40 years in your same clothing, although the Jewish people complained about the clothing, and the Moshe says it was a miraculous clothing, after the end of the days, they wanted to go shopping for some fresh clothing. They were in the mood of a nice pair of linen clothing. The men were in the mood of a nice linen suit. So they would go shopping for linen. Bilam said he knew his people. He said, let them go shopping for when you go shopping, that you'll get them in the shopping mall. So he says in the ancient malls, Aslam kloimi har sheleg ad beis hashimois. How far did they make these markets, these kloim, these tents of linen from Har Sheleg, which is the Hermon, right, the mountain of snow? Everyone knows the mountain of snow in Eretz Yisrael is the Hermon mountain, till Beis HaYeshimois. We learn about Beis HaYeshimois later, but I think if I remember correctly, there's a whole thing about the Beis HaYeshimois. Rashi gives a whole idea of Beis HaYeshimois. If I'm not mistaken, the Beis, it talks about it, I think, then with the waters of Miriam, the Beis HaYeshimois, I think, is all the way north. It's all the way west. I have to check the Rashi. All the way west towards the Carmel, right? Rashi says there somewhere by Har Carmel is the Yeshimois. So Har Sheleg to Har, that's very long. I mean, till today, I don't know if it means exactly that far. The Hermon, which is the most northeast part of Eretz Yisrael today, all the way, if you're talking about Har Carmel, which is in Haifa, you'll be talking about hundreds and hundreds, close to 100 kilometers. They set up prostitutes outside and inside, elder ones outside, and younger ones inside. The Jewish people went out to eat, and they were happy, right? They're getting ready to go in. They're out of the desert, so to say. They went to go, walk around the marketplace on full stomachs. So the elder one would start off. You're looking for some linens. So he said the elder one would offer it at its right price. I mean, at its proper price, at its what it should be priced at. The Yaldus and then the young girl would say, come inside. She's giving you two for $100. I can give it to you for 50. She gives it not that. She gives it 2-3 times cheaper. So they went to the younger person to get a deal, right? They started getting a deal. Be suspicious. Some of my Rosh Kol once told me, it's too cheap, I can't afford it, right? So they gave it to them cheaper than they could afford. Bahar Chelek, the mountain of the snow. When the Jewish people said, how much are you selling the linen suit for? So the older, unattractive woman, she's already elder, she would say a price that's value, which is its true value. The Yalda, the younger one, would say, they should say cheaper. And they kept on buying 2-3 times, so they became familiar with each other. Right? She became his his unique shop, and each one of the people. We're talking about 24,000 people here. You already a member of the family. You come shopping here, right? Shave, sit down. I'll feed you. She would put in front of him some amoni wines. The Gemara goes into that. Even Rashi says yain stam. We know the halacha is that yayin wines. We're very careful with wines. But wines that are poured is what's called yayin nesach. But this is yayin stam. It wasn't wines that were forbidden yet. It wasn't from the nachrim that they weren't allowed to pour. Do you want to drink a glass of wine? So she would get them a bit drunk. Given once they start to drink, their passions start to burn up within them, and that led to the sin of the Pa'or, which will continue in this story, as Hashem, with God's help, next week. Let's just finish off. Rashi says, she would say, you can already pick whatever you want. Once they drank the wine and they were comfortable and they were familiar, they got a little too familiar, and the Yetzer Hara started to get passionate. And from there started the story that we're going to learn next week of the sin of the daughter of Midian that led to the sin, not just of having relations, but to the actual worshipping of idols of the Pa'or. Okay, so just finish off. The Rebbe Steinsaltz says, no Gentile wine has been prohibited yet. There are two aspects of the prohibition of Gentile wine. One type of wine was used as a libatation, and it was poured on the altar to worship idols. That's called yayin nesach. Yayin nesach means they would pour the wines as a way of serving the idol. It's prohibited to drink this wine, and deriving benefit from it is forbidden by Torah law. So that already was forbidden for the Jewish people. In addition, there's a rabbinic decree rendering it prohibited to drink any wine belonging to a Gentile. That's the idea of yain stam till today, right? When you go to the supermarket and buy, and there's an option to buy kosher wine, non-kosher wine. The reason we buy kosher wine, it's fruit, it's grapes, right? Is because today the rabbi said that any wine, even if the wine was not being poured for an idol, that's called yain stam. The objective of the decree is to prevent socializing with Gentiles. Not just about that the concern, but it's drinking wine as a way of socialization, is how these people ended up sleeping with the daughters of Midian, which could lead to intermarriage. It is an ancient decree, as is related, that even Daniel refrained from drinking Gentile wine while in exile and in prison. The decree has not yet been issued during the lifetime of Moses. So the lifetime of not drinking yain stam, which already Daniel was careful in the times of the first temple, the destruction of the first temple. However, the Jewish people didn't stop. They didn't prevent themselves from drinking the wine, and that actually led to the story of the daughters of Midian. All right, we'll continue with the story of the daughters of Midian next week, and the fall of Bilam, etc. We'll continue until we finish. I think we get to Doeg at least next week. Laila Tov, everyone. We should stay safe and have a B'suras Tovos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome.